double think and double feel. This is one of those days we have happiness, but also a little tad of sadness. And the sadness is for Joan and John. Everyone know Joan and John? Put your hands up so everybody knows. We want to thank you so much for being wonderful members here, and we send you with love and blessings on your next journey. We will not hold it against you. You're going back to Buckeye Nation. It's okay, but we know you're going to be with family and grandchildren and everything. So we have a cake in the fellowship hall afterwards, so everyone make sure you give a hug and wish them wonderful travels in this next step. Go ahead, John. Thank you so much. Yeah, let's stand, give them a standing up. Stand up, let's stand up and recognize them for being wonderful members here. It's one of the things I hear more often than when new folks come and they say, all of a sudden I feel like I'm home. And I felt the same thing when I discovered Unity. You ready for today?
Yes.
Someone who's been taking the Tuesday class with me said after these first 3 chapters and what we were doing on Tuesday, I now understand why Maya Angelou and Oprah Winfrey said that this man was their spiritual, they felt the greatest spiritual teachings they learned from. And we're seeing the same thing unfold here. And as we look at what I love the way he has done here is how he layered the structure or creation, creator, whatever was working through him. But as you look at the building blocks that he has put together here, it's pretty amazing teaching. And every week I keep saying this, and I'm probably going to keep saying it, that this is a book that's going to be beside my study area, because whenever I start to feel like I'm off one of those rabbit trails, he has a way to bring us back to center and back to truth, and in a way that it's not so Victorian English like Charles maybe and Myrtle and some of those others that we have studied along the way. But this chapter, I will tell you, he gets right up in our grill, big time. And he also says that this is the one area that New Thought and Unity especially has forgotten and doesn't practice very well. And I have to agree with him, not only in myself, but also what I hear in the community. I don't know if any of you said this week, but I hear this. I am so sick and tired of that. Fill in the blank. Now, I know no one at Unity of Harrisburg says it, but you will hear that out. Do you not? I want you to just remember that phrase and think about if you've said it all week, and then begin to understand in the context of what we're talking about in this chapter, what you are not only doing to yourself, but what you're doing to the planet and to the universe. And that's what this chapter is about. This is the tape series, volume 1 and 2, as I've said. For those that weren't here the last couple of weeks, this is where it comes from. And this is a compilation of 16 years ago that put together finally at Unity to pull all of this incredible wisdom together. This is on the back flap, and I waited till now because I wanted to put it in the context of what we've been studying. God, or the allness, has already done for you and I all that's going to get done. Now for 50 centuries, I know we don't do it here, but people have prayed for God to do something else, for themselves or someone else. God has done a long time ago. Let's go on. When he included us in his image and likeness, we get to have all of that. That's why he named it allness. But here's the key, the potential. The potential is there, built in according to our own uniqueness, and it is our privilege of understanding it, recognizing it, acknowledging it, and then realizing it to give birth into our own affairs. Eric Butterworth comes right up smack against a lot of teaching that has found its way into New Thought and into unity, in that we're all children of God. We just showed up. That's a half-truth. And what he's saying, no, that's only potential. You get to choose. This is why we have free will choice, to bring that through us. And how do we do that? Last week we started. So let's go back, just a quick review. One of the things that Eric has done here is reframed. And I talked a lot about that a couple weeks ago. Reframe the word God. Reframe the word Brahman. Reframe the word Allah. Reframe the word the Tao. Whatever word is being used for that, and I believe, he didn't talk about this, but part of the reason why he reframes it is that so we don't have to bring all the baggage that we have in some bad teaching. If you remember in the beginning of the book, number one part of good education is forgetting what you already learned. It's got to start from there. Because if you keep trying to pile a new truth on some of it's not so good, what do you have at the base you still have not so good? So what he's saying in this reframing is we drop this whole notion of the Creator, God, what the source, whatever word you use, is one who blesses and punishes. That has been the teaching for 50 centuries, and it hasn't worked. And he's saying, no, it's allness. It's all. And then we reframed the Christ within you, which is being the divine or the allness within you. Here is again a half-truth. Someone has taught that when you just show up and you're the Christ. That is not what it says. And it's not what he's teaching in this book. You get to choose whether you're going to be the eachness. What does the eachness mean? It means each of us have the allness within us, potentially. And that's the piece, potentially, we like to throw away, because that takes us out of responsibility to bringing it forth through us. Every 7.5 billion now, it just went up, did you know that? We went from 7.4 to 7.5 billion on the planet, have the potential to be the eachness. What does eachness mean? Eachness means I have the allness within me. Potentially. If I begin to bring it through, draw it through me, then I live in the eachness. Very key teaching here in the first two chapters. And then as we go on, he begins to build. This is how you bring forth into your own experience and you become not potentially eachness, but live the eachness. So last week, all right, it just locked up. There we go. Thank you. Whatever. Changed it. So last week I had some eyebrows go up when I said no incidents ever in your entire experience in life causes your thoughts. And the eyebrows went, whoop. These are bold statements. These are as radical as the teachings that the master teacher did 2,000 plus years ago. But incidents do not cause our thoughts. Our meaning that we put to what occurs provides our thoughts. You know, this goes back to the question of when in the middle of the native forest, and the great big tree falls. Was there noise? No. If there wasn't an eardrum to hear. And we do the same thing with incidents that occur during the day, all day long. We put the meaning to it. Because it just is. It's not good or bad. A person isn't good or bad. They just are who they are. Most of them are repeating the same habitual patterns since 7 years old, do they not? And so do we if we choose to be that way. But he's saying there's a different way, and there's a way that you can bring this allness through to become the eachness by watching what you think and choosing what? You're good. Does anyone here not want to live every day of their lives in all goodness? If you don't, this is probably the wrong place for you. Who wants to live and not good? But we do because we choose that and we think about it and we put that meaning to it. No matter what occurs, we go immediately, habit-wise, to something that's not good. One of my mentors, Ralph Waldo Emerson, said this, and I wanted, because this goes back to potential again. Many, many teachers have taught this, but we resist it because we don't like what it makes us do. And that's take total responsibility for every thought we have. And we're going to add to that today. But man and a woman are inlets, potential of the allness, and we can become the outlet of it all. To all there is in God. Eric says, okay, I'm going to call that allness. But you and I have the potential to have all of it flow through us into our daily affairs. Or we can keep doing it the way we're doing, and as Dr. Phil says, how's it working for you? And it will not change until you and I change it and begin to recognize that potential and say, that's what I want. And I'm willing to get there no matter what. It takes that desire to make the shift out of the habits. Because these habits that are drilled into the neural pathways that we studied with Dispenza are deep. And we have to take the effort. But once we get over it, it becomes a new habit. And we've seen that over and over again. How do we do this? Now we come to where everybody gets a little bit nervous, including me. The power of the spoken word. How many of us were taught how to speak? I don't mean the sounds. We learned that little on up, right? And we did it by copying what our parents did, and then what our teachers did, and then what the smart people around us, the way they said words. But we do not get instructed on how to strategically and creatively speak. And we don't, as he said, give it a whole lot of thought. This is a direct quote from Eric Butterworth. Most of us, if we're really honest with ourselves, have given very little thought or attention to our words. It is simply a reflex behavior. Is that not true? Someone says something to you and we reflex. Patterns, habitual patterns, especially around speech. And what we have done is we said, oh, well, I was just kind of kidding, right? Or don't you love those passive-aggressive, oh, I was just joking? No, you weren't. You were being mean. But we like to call it, you know what I meant. No, I don't. But I tell you who does know what you meant is your subconscious. You can fool me, but you cannot fool your own subconscious. And we're going to look at that briefly. This 6,000 years ago in Proverbs from Solomon, the wisdom of Solomon, the power of the tongue gives the power of life and death. Whoa. started thinking this week about some of the things I've said. Ooh. And you say, well, you know what? I've said a lot of nasty things, a lot of mean things, and I didn't die. But it's not what it's talking about here. It's talking about the death of your health, or of your happiness, or your prosperity, or friendships and companionship. We were taught a bald-faced lie when we were kids. Sticks and stones will break my bones, but words will never hurt me. That's a lie, is it not? How many of you have been more hurt in your life from words than sticks and stones? It was a lie. That's how powerful words are and we're going to look at why are they so powerful, just so we can begin to understand what we're doing, not only to ourselves, but what we're doing to the planet and the universe. Because energy never dies. And words are energy. And they go forth from you and I and never die. Because energy never dies. But I tell you this, the master teacher said, you will give account on the day of judgment for every idle, empty word you ever speak. Now I want to talk about everyone, that's all of us. The day of judgment is not the day after you die and you go before some big golden throne and a big black book and it's got every chit in there that you ever said. It's today is the day of judgment, the master teacher said. In this now, you will begin to experience every word that you say. Why? The law is what? We reap what we sow. The East calls it the law of karma. Cause and effect. But every word that you and I say, every idle word, you say, well, joking doesn't count here, guys. Every word. We make account for it in our own lives, not in the hereafter at all. Here's an example he used in a book. Someone says, every time it rains, I catch a cold. I know we don't do that here. But when you catch the cold is your judgment day. Or I'm so sick and tired of whatever it is. Guess what you're going to get? Sick and tired. That's judgment day. In the moment, in the now, as it comes back to you in this universe of boomerang. We are responsible for every thought and every word that goes forth. And you say, well, it's too much work. I don't want to do it. Okay, that's fine. But guess what? The law will never be mocked, it says. It is absolutely perfect. You and I, by choice, determine what comes back. So John was the most enlightened of the apostles. He was the one who probably got it closest to what the master teacher was teaching. And he starts out John 1. In the beginning was the Word. Bad translation in the way we understand the word. In Greek, it looks like that. And in the beginning was the Logos. When you translate it to simply word, it loses its power and it loses its emphasis and it loses its importance. Charles said this, co-founder of Unity. Logos is the supreme idea in the creative power. It's how you and I create in our world. It's the Logos. In the beginning was the Logos. And the Logos isn't just word. It's the power that comes through it. And one of the ways you and I do that is when we connect to the name of God, I am. And that's why it has so much power. Because we're saying, in the power of the Almighty, in the power of the Allness, I have chosen that I am whatever you say it is. And that's the Logos. The Logos is not just the word coming out. It's when the power of the Allness comes through you. And it's the creative power in the universe. Charles said, Emerson said, Eric Butterworth said, Yogananda says, Bhagavad Gita says, every teaching in the whole world teaches that this logos that comes through us with power is the logos. It's the power and cause in our lives. Causal. We're going to talk about that. We cause whatever we want to come forth through the use of our thoughts, then we create them in logos as we speak them forth into the energy of the universe, into the quantum field, the field of unlimited potential. We attract and bring forth to us what we speak forth that we want. Our subconscious mind does not discriminate, does not understand the difference between causal and casual. It takes every word that you and I, that goes back to the teaching, every word, even the idle ones. Why? Because our subconscious takes it in and says, okay, Dan said that, that's what he wants. And we're going to bring it to him. Causal, the cause of, comes from causal words. But we say, wow, I was just joking. It was casual. Subconscious mind does not take a joke. It takes every word, every idle word, and says you are looking to cause in your life what you just said you want. Here's what happens. The energy goes forth from sound. Those who were here on Friday night, we experienced kirtan, the power of sound, the power of saying something over and over and over again creates an energy within you. And in that case, we were using the energy of Sanskrit sacred words. Putting forth that energy goes forward. I kind of think it looks like this. If we could take an MRI of the energy of the words as they go out of our mouth. And if you see that little thing happening out there, that's when it begins to coalesce around other ideas that you and I have. And it creates, its, in my mind, its own little vortex within our vortex. And that little vortex begins to spin at whatever you and I said we wanted. Because our subconscious said, Dan wants that, bring it back to him. And as it builds, and the more times I say it, I build the energy and the energy around the vortex. What attracts what in the universe? Like attracts like. And whatever you put out there, you're bringing your way. We reap what we sow. The boomerang universe, this is how we bring it back to us. You know, I love books. Here's another book that was written 100 years ago. We've studied Florence Scovel Shinn, the new members class who went through The Game of Life. This is a little book she wrote 100 and some years ago called The Power of the Spoken Word. This is not new news, but as Eric Butterworth says, we just don't want to embrace it. Because the ownership of responsibility, the ownership of personal responsibility goes to a whole nother level. But we're going to see at the very end, Eric challenges us in this chapter. And I'm going to challenge you to join with me in a challenge to see how powerful. Once you understand the power of the spoken word, you begin to realize that your words shape your life. And we have to first get that understanding. We have to quit fighting it. We have to release the resistance that we have to it. And I will say this about resistance, because I've watched this in the last 4 weeks, 3 weeks we've been in this book. This book has brought up some resistance in people. And here's my guidance for you. Whenever resistance shows up in me, I know it's where I got to go to work. Because it's showing up for a reason. And it's where your greatest, biggest, most amazing work will be. When you say, you know what, I'm feeling this resistance. I'm going to face it, find out what's going on here, and see what's next. Our words contact the power of the allness and bring it into our affairs. Logos is not just the word, it's the connection with this energy, this one power, flowing through us as we do that. We talked about a practice on Tuesday night where instead of saying affirmations, as we're looking into the mirror, doing the mirror reflective technique, we begin to speak to our soul. And as we're doing that, something changes. It's logos. And we want to be really, really careful, because when we're connected through the mirror in the window into our soul, and we begin to say these things, hopefully you're saying the good things that you want to bring forward as you speak from that. But that's the logos, speaking from your soul to what you want in your life. It's as simple and as difficult as that. Now the master teacher said this: the words that I say to you, they're not mine. I don't speak them. Now he called the allness within Father. He never called it Christ. That would never happen until 90 years later. But he said the Father within, this divine within me, this allness we're calling it, does the speaking for me. I don't know about you, but I'd like to be there. I think I would create a whole lot less disharmony in my life if I could somehow get myself to the place that the allness was always speaking through me. What do you think? Yeah, we can do this. Little by little by little. Because we built the resistance to it little by little by little. And we can change all of that like that. So I rewrote the Master Teacher Jesus' words. And I didn't get struck by lightning, so we're good. The words I say are not my own. The allness speaks through me. And so I went to the mirror and I began to talk to my soul, and my soul talked back to me with this. And I began to feel something happen, and it was different. And where somehow Dan was stepping aside and letting this flow happen. It was my first time I began to feel what that feels like, for the allness to begin to speak through me. And it's an incredibly amazing feeling. And it's available to every one of us. As you know, I love these circles. Omniscience, the mind of allness, the mind of God, the divine mind, will flow through you and speak through you. Now, they didn't teach this in churchianity for a long time, because you don't need priests and rabbis and preachers if you connect and can do this. But it's available to each and every one of us. But here's the question: how? When you choose. That's all it is. It's when you choose that you're not going to continue to do it the way you've been doing it for all the years you've been on the planet. And say, you know what? It worked, it kind of didn't work, but it's not where I want to be right now in my spiritual journey. I want to take it up a notch. And when you begin to choose that and begin to open to that possibility, remember, we have to first recognize the possibility. And then we have to have the desire to actually let it begin to happen. And in that process is when it begins to flow. And not choosing is a choice. That's what we've been doing for a long time, haven't we not? That's just how my family is. Well, you don't understand, Reverend Dan, that's just the way I am. No, it isn't. It's the way you chose to be. And continue to be if you want. But you can shift it immediately with a new choice and a new desire. When we recognize, acknowledge, and realize the allness is within me, within you. That's the first choice. And the second one is, I want you to speak through me today. So what are you saying to yourself during the week? Anybody going, well, they said, that's a flag. Whenever you hear say they, those they, well, they say this. Pay attention. I already said one I hear often, many times. I'm so sick and tired of it. Watch what you're saying, and you're going to begin to see where the connection is with what's coming forth in your logos. Eric says this, tell yourself, stop. Stop that. Here's who I know I am. I'm a radiant, all-wise, all-loving, all-conquering child of the allness. Is that an empowering place to come from? Versus, well, you know, I just never quite get it right, you know. Who wants to do that and keep doing it? But he's saying, stop it. Say, no, I'm not doing that anymore. Here's what I'm going to start saying about myself. Start with the logos about yourself. That's where I would start this week. And we're going to talk about that in just a minute. Anyone reading the book saw this? LS, GBS. He gives us little reminders for us. I hope you all write this on your mirror at home, in your car, in your office, everywhere you go this week. LS, GBS, let something good be said. Why? Isn't that what you want in your life? All good? Well, you're not going to have all good until you learn to do this. Let something good be said. LSGBS. I think we ought to get buttons made or t-shirts or something. But if this community would begin to practice this, what would begin to change in central Pennsylvania, no one could figure it out. It'd be called a miracle. And if you and I just take 10% this week, we're not going to get to 100. I get that. I tried it this week. I made it for about 8 minutes. And I had to start over again. But you know what? I'm setting intention for this. And that's what he's calling us for. Said, begin to look at everything you say. LS, GBS, and remind yourself. Let something good be said. And you're going to find out you get real quiet. And you don't speak near as much as you've been. If you use this as the intention to guide you through the day. We all love the word diet, right? But what's so interesting is I've seen spiritual teachers teach this as a fast, and I thought it was interesting that Eric chose the word diet. And here's what it is. It's a 7-day verbal diet. And what I love about this is that he's not asking you to stop doing anything or saying anything. He's asking you to watch that you bring only good. LSGBS. So what is it? Well, number one, he says, think before we speak. I know no one else here does this, but I do. I speak sometimes before I think. And he's saying, take a breath, get connected inside, get connected to allness, and listen before you articulate. What should I say here? There's a little bit of space. Take a breath. Ask and listen. And then put into words only what we want in our life. For 7 days. 7 days is not a long time, is it? 7 days in your life. It's not a big deal. But here's what he said about it, and I felt it was so important that I wanted to put it all up here. I can say one thing about this, and I can say it with sincere belief and conviction that to any person who will work on this week, you will not only become a part of the solution for a better world, you will also find your own discipline and participation in this positive flow. Things will take place in your marvelous way in your life. It's a pretty powerful statement you just made. But let me go on to the finish it. You will see a change. I'm talking about in a week, 7 days. You will see a change of the vibrational patterns that influence your whole life in a way that some would call miraculous. Are you willing to do it? It's very simple. You and I make a difference. And he says that this is one of the ways that you and I can change the vibrational pattern of what's going on the planet. I don't know how many people say, what's going on the planet right now, and he's saying, I give you a way to change it. And if each and every one of us, he said, just for one day, if everyone in the United States would let only something good be said, he said, in one day we would change the whole planet. Is that powerful? How many of you will join me on a 7-day verbal diet and give it a try for something miraculous? Don't put your hands up if you're not serious, because I'm going to be the police. I'm going to come check. See what happens. Email me. Let me know what happens in the middle of the week. But we're going to do it from this Sunday to next Sunday. Let something good be said. Be our guide. I'm excited to see how many people want to jump in and take this next shift. The one that's forgotten by most, new thought and unity, he says. We're not going to forget it here. We're going to put it into practice. Let's go. Let's go to silence, please. As you take a couple deep breaths. And this is a meditation that Eric did for chapter 4. Let's be still for a moment. And let's get this whole thing back into a true spiritual context. All things begin with the basic one, the creative logos. It's not just that we like to say to ourselves that we're spiritual beings, but we like to remember at the center of our being that each of us is spirit, being us, eachness. This is always true, whether we know it or not, whether we articulate it or not, or whether we recognize it or not. When we listen before we express ourselves, we listen to this vibrational pattern of the universe, which is expressing itself, articulating itself as us. Dynamic, wonderful, powerful, beautiful, fulfilling, and loving. You are a dynamic spiritual being. This is your basic identity in the universe. Make the commitment now that you're going to allow this to be the ground, the foundation, the center, the underpinning of all that you think and feel and articulate in the 7 days ahead. You're going to keep coming back to this. All things come out of the basic one and are resolvable back into it, says the Pythagorean system, and so does practical metaphysics. It's a vital realization that all positive, powerful things come out of this basic one at the root of our being and are resolvable back into it. We begin with this. We listen to this consciousness before we go to work, before we face people, before we get involved in any kind of relationship. We remember who we are, which I of us is true, and then we allow this consciousness to be embodied. As Emerson says, we are an inlet and may become an outlet to all there is in God. The outlet is the cutting edge of our spoken words. We project the spoken word in a positive power, and the words we speak are not my words, but the words of him who sent me. We allow them to flow forth through us in faith, in creativity, in love. And let's project ourselves in imagination now. We see ourselves going forth from this place, doing the normal confrontations that we have. Let's do such things right now in our imagination as talking to neighbors, ordering food in a restaurant, going shopping, standing at the cashier. See yourself through mental imagination as projecting positive power, keeping a seal on our lips, and saying only those things that are positive and creative. Say them in a loving, harmonious way, and we'll say, let something good be said. We use the phrase LSGBS, let something good be said. Let it be said positively, let it be said lovingly, let it be said with animation, let it be said in a way that truly represents us in the fullest, most powerful and creative way. It is in this sense we go forth committing ourselves to the practice of fundamental metaphysical principles in a very simple way. And ye shall know the truth, and this truth